I'm Muad'Dib that made the 7/7 ripple effect film and was recently in court in Southwark.
I'm Belinda, what you might call a truth campaigner, and I'm very honoured to be able to host Muad'Dib in my home.
I believe that because my film was an internet hit, it was so popular all over the world and has been translated into Spanish, Italian, German, Norwegian and other languages, that the government were afraid of the film because it is so persuasive that anybody with an open mind who watches it will know that that is the truth and that that is really what happened. Because I've used all of the information from the media. I haven't fabricated anything. I've just used mainstream media articles to actually prove that the government story doesn't add up and is a pack of lies. And so the government, I think that the government became so desperate to do something about it, to try to counteract the ripple effects of the film, that they arrested 3 friends of the original alleged 4 bombers to put them on trial. They couldn't possibly be guilty of helping 4 other young men to do something that those 4 other young men didn't do. And so I sent copies of the DVD film to the court where they were being put on trial, which was Kingston Crown Court, as an amicus curiae brief. Amicus curiae is Latin and it means a friend of the court. Under English law, that in my court case they did their best to ignore, under English law, anyone who is not a party, an actual party to a trial, but has what they consider to be relevant information, can send it to the court. It is then, which is what I did, it is then up to the court to view the evidence and to consider whether it is relevant to the trial, and if they consider that it is, they can then bring it to the attention of the jury, or if they decide that it isn't, then they just ignore it.
So is that a normal thing that people do and are allowed to do? Or?
Yes, that's the law. It's called, it has an official legal terminology, an amicus curiae brief.
So it's a total stitch-up.
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
So part of the proceedings were concerned with trying to prove that you were actually perverting the course of justice, or seeking, or with intention to pervert the course of justice.
Well, I know how evil these people are, and so when I sent the DVDs, which was in May of 2008, I had a 50-50 chance. I thought there was a 50-50 chance that they would come after me. But I had to do what I had to do, because these young men could have spent 20 or 30 years in prison for something they couldn't possibly have done. And I had all the evidence to prove that they couldn't have done it. So I had to send the film to the court. And then I heard nothing until, or from the legal people anyway, until on the 10th of February of 2009, the Garda Síochána, which is the Irish version of the police, came to my flat and arrested me. They came mob-handed. There were 2 plainclothes from the extradition branch from Dublin, and then 6 local uniformed Garda from my local station. So there were at least 8 of them. And I was arrested and taken to Dublin, and they searched my apartment. They took my computers and my DVD burner and various other things. And I was taken into custody, and then I appealed against extradition and all of that, and that went on for about 20 months. And eventually I was extradited. Altogether, including the time I spent in prison in Ireland before I was brought over, it works out to a total of 157 days for doing the right thing. And of course I've had 2 years, 3 months and 2 days of my life ruined being on semi-house arrest with curfews and having to sign at the police station 3 times a week, as well as the 157 days of actually being incarcerated.
What was it like being in prison?
Oh, it was lots of fun.
Don't tell me.
Yeah, it was okay. I have no complaints about the prison staff or the prison, anybody on that side of things. They're just doing their job, and it's not their fault that I was there. That's the fault of the government. Everybody was nice to me.
So how did the trial go?
I thought it went very well. My barrister asked me all the right questions, so that I was able to get all of the information about 9/11 and about 7/7, and also included the train bombings in Madrid, which were also done by the same people for a similar reason. And
You even mentioned the New World Order, didn't you?
yes, I managed to get in about the New World Order and the Illuminati, who are the head of the New World Order. My argument was in 2 parts. The first part was that Elizabeth was knowingly and willingly, with malice aforethought, crowned on a fake coronation stone in 1953, all of which I can prove in minute detail, and that she has broken her coronation oath, which is a contract with the British people, and she's broken it thousands and thousands of times. The very first time she broke her coronation oath, then the contract with the British people was broken, and that means that she was no longer the monarch lawfully, with immediate effect. And so she's been masquerading as the rightful monarch for the last 58 years. And the judge, in his decision, he said that the coronation stone was only a ceremonial artifact, and that it didn't really matter legally, and so that she was the Queen, and so he had jurisdiction to put me on trial, and he would put me on trial the very next day, which is what he did. And he never mentioned the second part of my challenge, which was breach of contract, because he absolutely knew that he could not argue against it.
What is the breach of contract part? Sorry.
Is the fact that she's broken her coronation oath. Not only has she broken her coronation oath, she has broken the law numerous times, has proved herself to be a traitor to the British people.
The signing of the Lisbon Treaty and the handing over of British sovereignty to Europe rankles with a large swathe of the public.
Of course.
Obviously, she's been complicit in that,
Yes.
by putting her name to that and allowing that to happen.
Yes, absolutely. And at her coronation, part of the oath that she swore was that she would maintain the laws of God to the utmost of her power. And she hasn't done that. She has in fact broken God's laws repeatedly, thousands and thousands of times, including signing our sovereignty over to the EU.
Has our sovereignty been
actually
handed over?
Sorry?
Has our sovereignty been signed over?
Yes, because the EU court now is superior to any court in Britain. And our laws are dictated to us now by Europe.
Would the Freeman movement agree with that? Do you think?
I don't really know. The Freeman movement, or at least the sections of it that I've looked into, they all seem to love Elizabeth and think that she's been betrayed by her ministers. But that isn't true, because she is the head of Parliament. She has the power, the reserved powers, the royal prerogative to dismiss the Prime Minister and the Parliament. So who is the boss? Prime Minister or the Queen? The Prime Minister cannot dismiss the Queen, but the Queen can dismiss the Prime Minister. That tells you who's really in charge.
It does put rather a large onus, I would say, of responsibility on the shoulders of one woman, who's after all just a human being like the rest of us. possibly the British public would have difficulty in putting all the blame on her when she's surrounded by all these people who should know better themselves. So this is a point we've been arguing.
And the British, the British Constitution Group and the UK column and those people, I contacted them quite some time ago and asked them to get involved and to help me to get the word out to the British public, and they all told me they loved Elizabeth. So I would take a slight issue with what Belinda says, because I don't think for one moment.
No, I'm just saying what some people said.
Yeah, I know. I don't think for one moment that Elizabeth thinks she's just a normal human being like the rest of us. She thinks she's way, way, way above all of us.
You can't really say what goes on in her mind.
And the other thing was that you were saying that, how can the judge be neutral if he's sworn an oath?
It's impossible. The judge's oath, in the judge's oath that he had to swear to become a judge, he swore allegiance to her. How then could he possibly act as an impartial broker in my challenge to her jurisdiction? Because I'm not only challenging her jurisdiction, I'm challenging his jurisdiction, because his jurisdiction and authority come from her. So if she has none, he can't have any either. And it is a legal maxim that no man can judge in his own cause or in a cause to which he is a party. And he absolutely, definitely could not possibly be impartial. And therefore he had no jurisdiction to make that decision in the first place. I asked for it to go in front of a jury to decide the jurisdiction and the sovereignty, because only a jury could be impartial, if anyone could. And he denied me that right, which means he committed treason that day.
I think most people in the ordinary public would be concerned about the lies surrounding the events of 7/7, and would find these discussions on the sovereignty of Elizabeth and whether she's broken her coronation oath somewhat arcane. But on the other hand, perhaps down the line we do need to look at the whole constitutional framework within which our body politic operates, because obviously there's scope for negative and destructive elements to get in, and including into the courts. So there's something wrong with the whole setup, and I think we need to have a thorough look.
Did you feel like the court was the court in general was on your side, or did you feel like you were being stitched up in any way? Is there any little bits and pieces?
The court staff were all very supportive of me. And they all said there is no way that jury can find you guilty. And they were all really, really happy when I was found not guilty, and they all came up to congratulate me. The judge, I think, was handpicked for the job.
Was he trying to stitch you up, do you think?
Absolutely, without a shadow of a doubt.
Have you got any examples that you can think of?
Yes. In his summing up, he actually perverted the meaning, the definition of the word pervert, which is used in the charge that was brought against me, which was attempting to pervert the course of justice, contrary to common law. We all know, or should know, that the word pervert means to divert something from its rightful course. And the judge told the jury that the word pervert meant to influence, in any way, positively or negatively, but to influence. And he emphasized that to the jury 3 times in his summing up, trying to convince them that they had to find me guilty, without actually instructing them to find me guilty, which would have then been wrong of him, because he's not allowed to do that. But he did everything but telling them to find me guilty by his perverting of the definition of the word pervert.
And also there were a couple of occasions where a point of law was raised, for example, and the judge seemed to rule in the favour of the prosecution.
Yes. Everywhere that he could do it, he was very sly. He he tried to pretend that he was neutral and that he was being fair, while slyly finding in the favour of the prosecution whenever he could.
Yeah, so those two things that I can think of were...
And when you momentarily expressed the mildest exasperation with what was going on, he snapped at you and told you to be courteous and to observe the protocols of the court. And it came down on you straight away, didn't it?
Yeah.
The prosecution didn't want the jury to know that these three that were on trial
In Kingston.
that they've been found,
Unanimous.
they've been acquitted.
Yeah, yes. And I told the jury a number of times that there was no real evidence against those three young men. It was a show trial, and it was the show trial designed to try to discredit me and my film. And so I managed to get in, even though the judge didn't want them to know and had ruled that they mustn't be told. I managed to get in that there was no evidence against them. It was a show trial, and they were found unanimously not guilty.
Good. And the other thing is the judge said, if you could kind of repeat what I said, the judge didn't want the jury to know, or the prosecution didn't want the jury to know, that 32 envelopes had been sent to the next trial as well, the repeat trial.
Yes, that's right.
So you had a lot of support, did you?
Yes, a lot of support, yes. Both inside the court and outside of it.
And
there were people queuing up to get in and couldn't, because there was only 21 seats in the public gallery, but there were many people outside who wanted to get in.
Some of us were very sneaky, and we sat two to a seat, trying to sort of make ourselves look like a regular row.
Yeah, I remember.
Yeah.
Oh, that's fantastic. So did that cheer you up, or?
Well, yes, it's nice to know that people are willing to take time off work and make the effort to come and support me. It was very heartening. So the summing up then of the prosecution's case was on the Thursday morning, the first thing that happened that you missed. And then my defence summed up to the jury and did a good job. And then the judge did his summing up and told them the points of law and perverted the definition of the word pervert. And then the jury went out at about 12:30, and at about 4 o'clock in the afternoon of that day they came back with their verdict, and the foreman, or forewoman as it happens, of the jury, the spokesperson for the jury, who hadn't smiled during the previous 4 days, was asked if they had reached a verdict, and she stood up and she said, "Yes, we have." And they asked what the verdict was, and she was beaming with a big smile. The first time I'd seen her smile. And she said, "Not guilty."
Oh, that's lovely.
And made it quite clear that she was very, very pleased to be able to give that verdict. So also the film is now officially part of the court records.
You played the DVD, didn't you?
Yeah, the entire DVD was played for the jury.
And including the way that the BBC are used to cover up for the government and to...
Yes, and that it's a propaganda machine that should never be trusted.
Just going to go back just quickly to, the judge seemed a bit grumpy, didn't he? And,
to say the least, yes, and I'm sure he's even more grumpy now.
He seemed to suddenly be extremely courteous to you and grateful for everything anyone said. But all I'm saying is he did strike count 2 from your... And how do you feel about that?
Well, he had to. He had to. He spent
But if he was a twisted, corrupt judge, if
the
that's
whole
a possibility.
point devolved around the integrity of the previous judge, Judge Gross, at the Kingston trial, and they suddenly found it was impossible to question to raise questions about the judge having himself been somehow a party to the perversion of the course of justice. This just wouldn't do. You know, that Judge Gross, seeing this material, would not have put it any further towards the rest of the court.
Okay. But the jury must have thought, oh, the prosecution's case is half collapsed.
Yeah, I would
Yes,
think
psychologically,
so,
I think it was quite a moment when count 2 was struck out, wasn't it?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Why do you think you were found not guilty? I mean, have you got any?
Because the jury saw me, they heard me, I explained to them, they saw the kind of person that I am, and that they believed that I was speaking the truth, which I was, and they decided it on a moral issue rather than a legalistic definition. They knew morally that what I did was the right thing to do, and they expressed that in their verdict.
Do you think? Why did you say 10 out of the 12?
Because it was a majority decision.
Okay.
They couldn't come to a unanimous decision. I believe because possibly 2 of them were plants.
Okay.
And they were obviously all very pleased when
They were
finally
all very pleased, yes. They'd all kept straight faces for the 4 days. But once the verdict was out and they stood up
Great
to
relief.
leave the court, they all looked at me and smiled, and I thanked them individually
Did you?
for their verdict, yes. And as they were standing up to leave the court, the public gallery burst into applause and applauded the members of the jury and cheered them. And I doubt that that's happened in a court case before.
Is there any new evidence that's surfaced which might have changed your original view of what happened on 7/7, or enforced it or changed it in any way?
There's a lot of evidence that has come out as part of the inquiry, the inquest, all of which backs up my film. None of it whatsoever causes any doubt that my film is the correct story of what really did happen that day. The government said that the 4 alleged bombers caught the 7:40 a.m. train from Luton to King's Cross, to Thameslink at King's Cross, and that train was cancelled that day. They were doing work on the lines at I think Mill Hill, and all of the trains were delayed that day by at least 25 minutes, and so they got a backup of trains, and eventually they cancelled the one that they were supposed to catch and the train after it. And
So is there no way that they could have been in London?
no, it was impossible for them to have been in London in time to catch the 3 trains that they were supposed to catch as part of the training exercise. The next train that they could have caught, which they probably did catch, got them into Thameslink after the trains had blown up. So they couldn't possibly have been on the trains. And also witnesses within the carriages, a number of them have stated that there were no backpack bombers, there was no left luggage, no backpacks left sitting around, and that the floors blew upwards, and that the bombs were obviously fastened underneath the floors of the trains, which nobody could do except someone who has access to the trains when the trains aren't running.
There's no CCTV footage of the bombers on the platforms or going down the stairs into the tube. When there are all these cameras all over the tube, none of them seem to have been functioning.
No,
Anyway, it's just
mysteriously.
Dare I say that dreaded BBC film, but the BBC suddenly presented some CCTV to, was it Nick Holstrom or someone?
Nick Holstrom.
They showed him and he was quite flummoxed. What was that about? I mean,
I'm trying to remember which bit it was that they showed him.
and he seemed
But
a bit lost for words.
Yeah, they sprung it on him.
Yeah.
Oh, it was the footage where they show 3 young men coming into a station and you can't recognize them at all. And there is no time and date stamp on that piece of footage, and they sprung it on him, and they were filming him without his knowledge, and he that was the first time he'd seen. He didn't believe that they'd actually ever made it to London, whereas I'd always maintained that they did, but they got there too late to catch the tube trains. And of course this footage that they sprung on Nicholas, because he believed that they never made it to London that day, he was taken aback. But there is no time and date stamp on it, for obvious reasons, because when they got there after the tubes had blown up, then this piece of footage, if it was them, and there's no proof that it actually was them, because you can't recognize them in this footage, would have to have the time and date stamp removed. Otherwise the game would be up, because it would show that they were on camera there after they were supposed to be dead on the tubes.
Yeah, but if they did shoot these people in Canary Wharf, surely there would have been hundreds of witnesses.
The police told everybody in the buildings to stay away from the windows, and for a number of hours while they tidied up, cleaned up the mess. I know for a fact from newspaper articles, from internet chats of people who were there that day, saying that these things actually did go off. And as further proof of that, I have a friend who was working in Canary Wharf that day, and he knows that something went down that day in Canary Wharf, and that they were talking about people having been shot.
There was brief coverage of it later in the afternoon on I don't know which media it was, but I think it was one of the BBC channels.
Yeah.
But then it was never shown again, or never discussed again. You never saw it again. It sort of appeared briefly.
Yeah.
There had been an incident in Canary Wharf.
And also on the internet there is a YouTube clip where the police are holding a press conference, and a journalist, as I think she said she worked for Sky News, said that they had received reports of the police shooting and neutralising suicide bombers in Canary Wharf that day, and could the police comment on it, please? So it's out there. It's not something that I've made up.
Is there anything else you want to add about the 7/7 story? Not story, but
Watch the ripple effect.
The truth. Yes, please watch the Ripple Effect film, 7/7 Ripple Effect, and please share the film with everyone that you know, because the only chance we have of stopping these people doing it again, they've done it in New York and Washington, where the Pentagon is, they did it in Madrid, they've done it in London, they did it in Bali, they can do it anywhere. And the only chance we've got of stopping them is when everybody knows that it's really them doing it and not the Muslims, and that they know that everybody knows that it's them doing it, not the Muslims, and hopefully then they will stop doing it and we can bring them to justice.
What do you think is the end game of these people?
World domination. It is the new world order, their new world order.
And what do they want? I mean,
they want control, they want ownership and control of the entire planet through their banking scams and stock markets and all the rest of it, and their ownerships of companies and front companies and all the rest of it. They own about 75% of the planet already, or think they do. But they want it all.
And the battleground at the moment is the Middle East, the Muslim heartland, which is why they want to demonise the Muslims and make them look like enemies, within our own bosoms. This is the whole point of 7/7, to give the impression to the British public that there are dangerous terrorist Muslim elements within our own country, and therefore it's necessary to go and suppress them abroad, as well as clamping down on them inside UK.
Yeah.
Is it possible?
They also have a plan for population reduction. The elite of the Illuminati, the New World Order, consider the rest of mankind to be useless eaters. And what they want to do, and it's part of their agenda, they want to reduce the population to below 500 million. And that's on the Georgia Guidestones in the state of Georgia in America.
What do you think about the story about Osama bin Laden being killed?
For the 9th time. Benazir Bhutto, the president of Pakistan, or ex-president of Pakistan, was interviewed by David Frost of Al Jazeera, and in that interview she stated that Sheikh Omar murdered Osama bin Laden in 2001, and other reports state that Osama bin Laden died on or about the 15th of December of 2001. And all the videos and the audios that have been brought out since, at times when it was appropriate for the governments to frighten the people, to allow them to pass legislation that they wanted to pass, or to do things militarily that otherwise the people wouldn't like them to do, they have brought out these videos of supposedly Osama bin Laden, but it's all been actors. It hasn't been Osama bin Laden. He died in December of 2001. After Benazir Bhutto made that statement in her interview with David Frost, that part of the video was edited out before it was broadcast by the BBC, and then she was murdered, to keep her quiet, of course.
So what happened the other day then? What happened?
More theatre. They murdered somebody, we don't know who it was, because we've seen the photographs of bodies and blood on the carpet and all the rest of it. But it was not Osama bin Laden. The neighbours who live there say they've never seen him there, and that they don't believe that it was Osama bin Laden, because it's a military restricted area, and for the locals to get into that area they have to show their ID to their own military. And that house is next door to a military college, which would be the equivalent of Sandhurst or West Point in America. And it's just not possible for Osama bin Laden to have been there in a restricted area right next door to their military academy.
I want to say something about 2012 here, because
Yeah, well, so do I.
We're reaching what is being hyped up to be an apocalyptic moment in human history. How about if it's not just a change in consciousness, so that people, having been lied to for centuries, for millennia, suddenly begin to use their God-given, I think I happily will say, superior mental faculties and intelligence to actually see what pack of lies has been put in front of them all this time, and therefore begin to discard the conventional processes of government and set up new processes which will actually represent the majority of the people on this planet, rather than an elite from now on. This could be a watershed moment in human history, and that could be what 2012 is all about.
Yeah.
And I believe this gentleman is a very big part of that.
What do you think about 2012?
Well, if it wasn't part of their agenda, they wouldn't have made films about it. Because films take an awful lot of financing, and they've been pushing it in the media. They control all forms of media except the alternative media that we're working with. And so all of the newspapers, the film industry, Hollywood, as I like to call it, because that's what it is, it's very weird.
So you think they're planning quite a dark side?
Yes, to use this 2012 to frighten people.
But what could it be if? Do you see what I mean? I mean, some spiritual people think that it's a. Some people say it's a sort of ascension process for humanity and
Armageddon.
A conscience shift. Well, they'll be working towards Armageddon. Yeah.
And we must work equally hard towards shifting the consciousness.
We must work harder still, not equally, but we must overcome their negativity and evil with positivity and good.
Yeah.
And truth.
And truth, yeah.
Is there any chance you can seek any justice for the 150 days you've served? Sorry to go back on that.
My solicitor seems to think that it's unlikely that I will be able to get compensation.
Okay.
But he says it's not his field of speciality. And
Do you want to?
Oh yes, absolutely.
Apart from anything else, they've shifted a whole lot of your personal possessions over to UK, including this body, as you call it, which needs shifting back to where it's supposed to be at home.
Yes, and what they want you to do is leave me here and hand over my personal property to me here, and then it's up to me to get myself and my property back to where they took me and it from in the first place. And they seem to think that that's fair and just, and that shows you a lot about the way they think.
Do you think they really thought that they would be able to get you for this?
Oh, absolutely.
And how long do you think they would have tried to give? What do you think they would have tried to give you?
The maximum they thought they could get away with, and the maximum for that offence, although nobody's been given it for the maximum is 20 years in prison. I don't think they would have thought they could have got away with that, but I think they would have given me as long a sentence as they could possibly get away with.
When you were going to get rid of your barrister at one point, weren't you?
I did consider it, yes.
And are you pleased you didn't?
Yes, in hindsight, yes. My barrister did a very good job.
She did. She asked the right questions.
Yes.
Brought him out.
And she's a very nice person, and I would recommend her to anybody who needs a barrister.
Yeah.
Yeah, lovely.
She's a very nice person. And my solicitor as well.
Oh, very nice.
Yes, he was very nice. He was very helpful, very supportive. And he, of course, found the barrister for me.
Oh, right, lovely.
Because they worked together as a team.
We were just worried at a certain point that Muad'Dib would be left behind a sort of glass grill at the back of the court and not be able to really interact with the body of the court unless he was representing himself. So.
But you came across so well in the witness thing.
But in fact, we needn't to worry because he made the right decision. She did a good job.
Yes,
and she couldn't have fought the judges going, oh, that's the point of law.
She explained to me that the judge, if I tried to defend myself, would keep trying to stop me from talking. So it would be better if she asked me all the right questions, so that I could actually then say everything that I wanted to say.
Which she was able to.
Which she was able to do very efficiently.
Yeah.
And what do you plan to do now?
Carry on the fight, to educate the public to the reality, in the hope that I can wake up 83% of the nation, not just 83% of the jury, and bring the real perpetrators to justice.
Any ideas of how you might do that? Okay, well, I think that's fantastic. Thank you so much for talking. And
that was a very long 10 minutes, wasn't it?
It was a very long 10 minutes. So he sent him to a trial and was accused of perverting the course of justice because he strongly believes that the Muslim bombers didn't do it.
Yes, I've seen that on the internet and read all about that. A lot of people.
Oh yeah, so he sent him to this trial and they said he was perverting the course of justice and they extradited him from Ireland and.
But the ones I saw were very convincing.
The ones that they saw?
Take me!
What did you see?
I've read a lot about it on the internet.
Yeah.
And I've seen some YouTube video.
Yeah.
And it was actually very convincing that the bombings were performed because all the videos, all the CCTV evidence went missing and and then one of the survivors in one of the tubes, I don't know, her evidence contradicted. They were saying that the bombs came up through the floor. It's like the 9/11 bombings that people are saying. It didn't.
Exactly.
Not that it didn't happen, but it wasn't done.
So luckily, apparently, they found him not guilty. So.